Dear Indian friends, greetings from Bell'Italia 88 and welcome back. I am Caterina Brazzi-Castracane, I am an historian and I am here in collaboration with the Italian Culture Center in New Delhi to share with you another appointment dedicated to the rediscovery of some wonderful cities of Italy. And today, in this way, we are going to talk about Turin, the charming capital of Piedmont, this important region in the north part of Italy, but actually the first charming capital of our country. Because it's important to start remembering that this wonderful and amazing town, surrounded by the Alps, as you are seeing with this panoramic picture, was the hearth during the 19th century of that political and cultural movement called Risorgimento. Movement that was able to realize that the unification of Italy in 1861, here when Turin was proclaimed the capital of this new kingdom. And the idea that I would like to share with you today is that during the centuries, even before the year 1861, the city of Turin was several times transformed to be the perfect stage for the history and also for being an icon of modernity and pleasure. The last important renovation whom the city underwent was organized for the celebration of the Winter Olympic Games in 2006. Here, that could be really considered as the starting point of a new post-industrial era for the city of Turin. Elements, the post-industrial one, that is particularly important to understand the contemporary identity of this city, because you have to remember that during the 20th century this city was completely dominated by the presence of the huge factory called Fiat that originally had been opened in Turin at the starting point of that century. According to the legend, the city of Turin, the original settlement of the city of Turin, was founded by the Taurin tribe over 2000 years ago. And later, that settlement was occupied by Romans and redesigned to be the perfect military citadel in that part of the north of the Italic peninsula. And the link between the powerful Rome and the new settlement was also remarked by the new name that was chosen to this city, name that was chosen in Julius Augustus Taurinorum in honor of both the two first emperors of the Roman Empire, Julius Caesar and his adoptive son Augustus. As other important cities that were designed at the same time by Romans in other parts of the empire, also the Roman Turin was designed as a perfect checkerboard. These important quadrilateral area bordered by walls and with important gates realized to control the territory around it. And still today, the most remarkable monument linked with the Roman heritage in Turin is an example of a fortified access point called Porta Palatina and realized exactly with the aim to control the city. Still today, Porta Palatina is a corner that is a part of the Roman area of the historic center of Turin called the Roman Quadrilatero, and that you can imagine as the central part of the city from where the historic center was completely enlarged during the centuries, basically in two main important way. The historic center was enlarged first of all to the direction of the river Po, and then to the direction of the Dora Port, with the opening of important different buildings realized during the modern age around the center of Turin, yesterday as today, that is called Piazza Castello, that will be object of the second part of this lecture. During the centuries, in these two directions were also opened to other elements that could be represented as the icon of Turin. First of all, the square called Piazza Vittorio Veneto, that is a sort of balcony in front of the river Po, but also the important and cosmopolitan market of Porta Palazzo, that is a myth of the contemporary Turin, an international and important market well known all around Europe. But exactly to understand the value of the urbanistic transformation of the city of Turin, we have to name the Savoy family that linked its destiny to the city of Turin since the last part of the 13th century, and destined also to be remembered as the only royal family of Italy. In particular, you have to imagine that the destiny of this city was completely transformed from the moment when a member of this family, the Lord war Emanuele Filiberto I, Duke of the Duchy of Savoy, that actually at that time was composed of two important regions. One region in the south part of France after the Alps, and one region that is basically the contemporary area of Piedmont. This man, I was saying, decided to move the capital of his duchy from Chambéry in France to Turin in Italy. And since that time, the destiny of Turin, but also the destiny of Italy, really changed. Even because, and I am speaking about the city, he arrived there with different important artists and architects that realized the first renovation of this city that was transformed into an icon of modernity, but also according to another legend. Emanuele Filiberto arrived in Turin with the cocoa beans. Cocoa beans that had already arrived from the America to Spain, but that in Turin were transformed into the first example of chocolate to drink of the history. Still today, chocolate in general is the myth of Turin. The Savoy family at that time, at the starting point of the 17th century, decided to transform the city basically in two ways. First of all, they decided to realize an important and permanent residence for the Duke and the Count around him. But actually, at the same time, they decided to realize an important public open space that should be the touchable representation of the power and the richness of the Savoy family and of their duchy. For this reason was called, first of all, the architect Ascanio Vitozzi, who realized the first project of a public square that will be called Piazza Castello, from the castle that still today is the center of this square. This castle is called Palazzo Madama, and we will see together it is a perfect example of two different kind of buildings put together. They realized that the important royal palace that is exactly closely linked with the name of the Savoy family, but also realized this important example of Palatine Chapel, realized to be the house of an important relics that we will discover together. Also, the Royal Theatre was realized in Piazza Castello later during the 18th century, and unfortunately the picture that you are seeing of the facade of the Royal Theatre is a picture of the contemporary version of the theatre, because the original one was completely destroyed by fire at the starting point of the 20th century, but rebuilt after the Second World War. But also in Piazza Castello we find this amazing shopping mall called Galleria Subalpina, an important example of the taste so popular between the 19th and the 20th century. The starting point of the itinerary of today is the Royal Palace, because actually we have to start remembering that Emanuele Filiberto I chose the Bishop Palace as his first residence in Turin after the year 1563. But quickly the important architect realized this enlargement of the original palace to realize an important and noble residence for this family. And a lot of different architects realized this important palace that you are seeing here with this ancient image, including Ascanio Vitozzi, the same architect who started the renovation of Piazza Castello. After him, Amedeo Castelmonte, that is another important architect destined to be remembered as a genius for the transformation of this city. After him, Filippo Juvara, that is a myth in this case of the architecture for Turin, but in general for Italy, and also Pelaggi, who realized this important gate in front of the royal palace in 1840, gate that ended with the sculpture realized by San Giorgi some years later, with the figures of the Dioscuri, the son of Zeus, according to legend, symbol of virtue and power, and realized there to protect the area of the royal castle, but also with the gate to delimitate the area of the original royal square from the area of Piazza Castello. But inside the royal palace used to work also Filippo Juvara, that, as I was saying before, was a myth of architecture during the 18th century. But to understand why a Sicilian architect transformed the city of Turin, we have to name also another important member of the Savoy family, Vittorio Amedeo II, that was the first member of this family that was named King of Sicily in this case, after the international peace of Utrecht in 1713. In that case, when he was declared king of that region, he went there, and there met the genius of the Sicilian architect Filippo Juvara that was realizing at the same time the masterpieces that are still today part of the cultural heritage of important cities of that region. And the king was so fulgurated by seeing the masterpieces realized by this architect to call him to Turin to commission him different kind of works, including a new part of Piazza Castello destinated to house the royal theater and also the offices for the royal family, called Area del Comando. At the same time, Juvara realized important and amazing masterpieces inside the two important palaces of Piazza Castello, inside the Royal Palace, and we will see together inside the Palazzo Madama. Starting for today with Palazzo Madama, the Royal Palace, where he realized this important and amazing scissor staircase, so named because of the stucco in the center of the vault with the as a representation of the scissor, and destined to be remembered as an icon of the neoclassical taste of that time. But also Juvara inside the royal castle realized this important Chinese room or Chinese cabinet, an exotic and elegant space that was so popular at that time inside the most remarkable aristocratical residence of Europe. Another important part of the royal palace is linked with the gardens that were realized behind the palace, starting from the first part of the 17th century, and in particular that during the 18th century were transformed by the hand of another important architect, André Lenôtre, that was during that time well known because he had realized the garden of Versailles. Here he realized this important part of the garden called Giardino delle Arti, and he was destined to be the real and important architect of the last important transformation of this green area that still today is a cultural and powerful heritage inside the historic center of Turin, because as you are seeing with this picture, the gardens are here behind the royal castle and around the area of Piazza Castello. And you have to consider also which is the exact value of a green area inside the historic center, and part this important system of gardens of the huge royal system museums, an important system of palaces and collection that were housed inside them, link with the transformation of the royal residence in a specific kind of museums to house the masterpieces of this city, and also protected by UNESCO into a specific system of museums linked with the original residence property once of the Savoy family. But in the same area of the royal palace, we can find this strange building that actually is a church originally dedicated to San Mary ad Presepe, but later redesigned by the end of an important architect for the will of Emanuele Filiberto I, that decided to reconsecrate this temple to the important Saint Lawrence, who had protected him and Philip II of Spain during the Battle of St. Quentin that took place on the 10th of August 1557 against the France. In this case, the church was originally realized to house here the Holy Shroud, this important and Catholic relic that had arrived from Chambéry to Turin for the veneration of the Archbishop of Milan, San Carlo Borromeo, who had arrived on foot in Turin as thanks for the end of the plague in Milan in 1578. But actually the church was redesigned by the end of an important monk and architect, Guarino Guarini, who realized this strange kind of building, because actually the original project by Guarino was to realize an important facade and an important dome. The facade was never built because of the will of the Savoy family that didn't want to affect the harmony of the square, and Guarino was able only to realize the amazing dome that was realized from the Islamic inspiration and also with the shape of an eight-pointed star. This church was realized with the aim to house the Holy Shroud until the moment when it was transferred into the chapel created to house it for the rest of the time. The same hand of Guarino Guarini realized that this chapel called after the Holy Shroud and realized to be a perfect private chapel between the royal palace and the cathedral of Turin. An amazing Baroque masterpieces, in particular with this important dome realized to celebrate the ascension to the sky of the faith that unfortunately was completely destroyed by fire in 1997. For a miracle, the Holy Shroud was not there at that time because the chapel was waiting to be restored, and so for this reason the Holy Shroud during that time was in another part of the church. But the chapel was completely destroyed, and just this year, after a long period of restoration, the dome came back to its original Baroque splendor and came back to be one of the icon of Turin, link with the important relic of the Holy Shroud. But also the so-named Palazzo Madama is a myth of Turin. That palace that was called by the poet Guido Gozzano the House of Centuries, an important idea of an intricate palace basically composed of two different parts. First of all, as you are seeing with this picture, with the center that is basically composed of this medieval castle or casaforte, originally property of a cadet branch of the Savoy family, and that was destined to be completely covered by a project by Filippo Juvara that was never completely realized. As you can see with this project, the idea of Juvara was to cover and to hide the castle inside the new system of palace, neoclassical palace, realized all around the original medieval castle. Unfortunately, between 1718 and 1721, Juvara was able only to realize that this important facade that was destined to be remembered as another important architectural element realized by his hand in Turin, but also inside another important and wonderful example of staircase destined to be a neoclassical myth of Turin, and also in this case the Palazzo Madama was destined to be both a museum to house the collection of ancient arts, but also part of the UNESCO heritage link with the original Savoy residences in Turin. The last important palace that was originally designed by Filippo Juvara for Piazza Castello was the Royal Theatre. That actually was realized by the hand of another architect, Benedetto Alfieri, later after Juvara, and definitely inaugurated in 1740. This theatre quickly became a myth of that century, a myth so important for the Europe and also for all the travelers that used to make the important tradition of the Grand Tour to discover the beauties all around Europe. And the theater in Turin was so celebrated to be inserted inside the masterpiece of that century, the Encyclopédie by Diderot and d'Alembert, where one part is dedicated to the Royal Theatre as a temple of arts. But this theatre is also interesting for us because when Turin was occupied by France in the name of the Emperor Napoleon I, the theatre was transformed into the perfect place where celebrated the new kind of power that in Turin was reorganized around a new kind of government, and this government was ruled by important men linked with the figures of Napoleon I, including one of his brother-in-law, Camillo Borghese, husband of the well-known and famous Paolina Bonaparte. And for them, the theater was reopened several times to celebrate different kind of moment of their life with specific spectacles. And for us is also interesting to notice that at the same time when the French occupation ended and Turin came back to the kingdom of Savoy, the city was destined to be remembered as the city of our Risorgimento, with important figures including Camillo Benso Conte di Cavour, that is the political genius of that moment. And as I was saying, it's interesting and a little bit ironic to notice and remember that this icon of the Italian Risorgimento, the icon and man who was born in Turin in 1810, was named Camillo in honor of of Camillo Borghese, because the man so link with Napoleon I was a friend of the Benso family. And this aspect could help us to understand that the 19th century really is a difficult century to understand, full of different elements that during the times were put together to create something that we called literary age, contemporary age. And to understand the last part of the history of Turin, we have to understand exactly that figures as Camillo Benso Conte di Cavour or Giacomo Puccini or Nietzsche during the same century spent a lot of time inside the new mania of that time, the coffee house. And in particular, starting from the last part of the 18th centuries, a lot of different coffee houses were opened inside the historic center of Turin. Coffee houses that were definitely transformed into cultural living room, where it was possible to discuss, to spend some time together, and to create a new idea of Italy and of culture. And maybe the most famous among these modern coffee house is still today called Albicerin, from the king of pleasure that is possible to drink there. That is a sort of another interpretation of myth of Turin. A drink basically composed by coffee, chocolate and cream, real and amazing pleasure, so important for the city of Turin to be transformed into a myth also by the hand of Umberto Eco, who used to write about it inside one of his masterpieces called the Prague Symmetry. But at the same time, the new idea of culture that was growing in Turin during that time was also remarked by the decision by another important member of the Savoy family, the King Carlo Felice, to open the first nucleus of the Egyptian Museum. First nucleus that was enlarged with other important collection during all the centuries to be definitely transformed into the most important Egyptian museum of the world, after only, obviously, to the one that is in Cairo. This is a real myth of the cultural contemporary Turin, full of different kind of collection elements, sarcophagus, example of papyrus and also hieroglyph or other elements that really were collected and housed there to be the touchable proof of the powerful of the modern idea of what really the ancient Egypt was. And this museum still today is part of the important system of museums that are definitely transformed Turin into a post-industrial city, into a center of culture, basically for the renovation of this city. But another important myth that is impossible not to remember is the Gianduiotto. Basically, one of the first chocolate that were produced in Turin at the end of the 19th century, the king of chocolate that was named in this way because it was realized with the new cream realized by the Maître Chocolatier Caffarel, just putting together the cocoa powder and the powder from the hazelnut from the area of Le Langhe, still today an important area completely destinated to product this kind of fruit, and realized for the celebration of the power of chocolate in that city during that time. The Gianduiotto was named in this way in honor of the Gianduia, that actually is the traditional mask for the carnival in Turin, and together with the Cremino, realized by other two important men, Baratti and Milano, two maîtres chocolatiers that realized this wonderful other example of chocolate destined to be so famous, in particular during the 20th century. Caffarel and Baratti and Milano really represented the powerful new generation of Turin during the last part of the 19th century. In this case, the shop of Baratti Milano is also important because was opened at the starting point of the 20th century inside the Soba Pine Gallery in the center of Piazza Castello. And the shop that still today is an important and obliged stop in this gallery is something that was destined to be remembered as an important part of this place that was originally designed by the architect Pietro Carrera and realized to be the icon of power, industrial power of that time. The project is a reinterpretation of the French passage or shopping mall realized during the same time. We have already seen together other important example of passage as these, talking about Rome, or in particular talking about Milan. And this gallery was destined to be the temple of the new modern shops and boutiques. Unfortunately, the gallery was completely destroyed during the Second World War, to be later rebuilt and to came back to the important splendor link with that moment called Belle Époque, that was the last powerful time of Europe between the end of 19th century and the starting point of the 20th. And the gallery maybe is an icon of that time, together with the real myth of Turin. The central dome and buildings of the skyline of this city, a building called after the name of the two architects who realized it during the second part of the 19th century. First of all, Alessandro Antonelli, for the will of the Jewish community that commissioned him to create the first example of public synagogue in accord with the religious freedom of the Jewish community in that moment of our history. For a lot of different kind of difficulties and problems, the project to build definitely a synagogue was interrupted, and the building was both by the municipality of Turin, who commissioned the son of the Antonelli, in this case Costanzo Antonelli, to finish it to celebrate the unification of Italy. The palace was definitely open on the 10th of April 1889, and during that time it was among the highest buildings of Europe. The mole, so named Mole Antonelliana, was again renovated for the anniversary of the unification of Italy in 1961, with the important elevator that still today is the perfect way to arrive to this panoramic balcony called Tempietto, that is the perfect place where you can admire the city of Turin, in particular to the direction of Piazza Vittorio Veneto, this balcony in front of the Po River, with the other side in front of you, with the important example of churches in particular realized during the centuries. But the last life of this monument is linked with the National Cinema Museum of Turin, that originally was founded in 1931, but that actually since the year 2000 is housed inside this important palace, and that together with the Torino Film Festival, this important manifestation organized for the first time in 1981, is a sort of temple destined to celebrate the power of the Seven Hearths as part of the cultural heritage of Turin. And in this way, the last element that I would like to share with you is a manifestation that is organized for Christmas time in Turin since the 1998 manifestation that is called LUCI d'Artista, just a sort of temporary exhibition of lights realized by the most important contemporary artist, and the manifestation that was organized also for the last Christmas, the Christmas 2020, that was remarked by this dramatic period that we are living all together in the different part of the world. And this is the reason why the municipality of Turin decided also to create a short video dedicated to the installation of the last year, to celebrate the power of art and in general of culture, to help us to resist during this difficult moment. And this is the reason why I choose to end this lecture just sharing with you this short video that is a sort of important representation of the power of art.
Outline in the dark and hear the blood run in your heart when we're in each other's arms. Stillness of the night is here with all the rhyme of our fear. Try to reopen our scars, but nothing in this life is real, and time alone won't help to heal. Getting to the hardest part. Time is running out for us, and all our dreams will turn to dust. Never dream it'd be so hard. Tearing me apart. Must be something that I can't
power of art and culture and light is the link between us. And at that point, I stop sharing with you my screen to say thank you very much for your attention, and we will see again to discover together other important and wonderful cities of Italy. Thank you very much, and see you the next time. Bye bye.